In my ideology, race is the idea that has to be made up by people that there are biological differences among humans that can divide them into groups. I consider this idea to be false due to scientific evidence. There are usually more genetic differences among members of the same group that is considered a race than between different races. Studies show that genetic diversity grew as people migrated further from Africa, where humans first evolved. Therefore, the people that have the most genetic differences from Africans are Aboriginal Australians. Genetic markers within people considered to be different races are not different enough for doctors to use them in their medical research. Differences in skin color develop due to vitamin D and folic acid, and changes in DNA among humans are continuous. The concept of people belonging to separate races occurred due to oppression, because Europeans, who had technologically developed faster than Africans, wanted to justify that they were taking advantage of a group of people. People have evolved to make stereotypes against people who look different because, in the days of hunter-gatherers, they needed to know in a split second if they needed to run away or defend themselves from someone. They considered the person they met to be scary because they looked different from them. Dividing people into races like we divide dogs into breeds dehumanizes people and is a false construct. Race can influence factors like privilege and access to opportunity, while people of different races should share equal rights. Ethnicity, unlike race, in my ideology defines real groups who share a common identity based on ancestry or culture. While race is meant to be a biological term, ethnicity is a social science term and groups people together who have the same traits such as religion, beliefs, and customs. An example of the things that divide ethnicities is the type of food people eat. Mediterranean people, for instance, are famous for consuming olive oil, nuts, and fish. The idea that people who share similar physical characteristics, such as hair texture and facial features, is based in discrimination against people who are different and used to subjugate other groups, but differences in ethnicity can be celebrated. A group that is of a minority ethnicity can foster pride in and support each other. Another trait that often unites people of the same ethnicity is the language they speak. An example of this is that Hispanic people are grouped together because they speak Spanish. Race is meant to be inherited, but ethnicity is picked up based on factors like where someone lives. One's race is defined by what someone calls you based on your appearance, but ethnicity can be chosen by the person. Some people identify with multiple ethnicities. A person whose mother is Irish and father is African American might think of themselves as part of both ethnicities. This creates wonderful diversity and a mixing of cultures. Ethnicity to me refers to the group a person considers themselves to have the most in common with or where they fit best. Culture in my ideology means a group of people's customs and traditions. Someone's culture can be considered what decides their ethnicity. It can involve language, music, marriage, clothing, and many other traits. Culture is what sets one apart from the rest of the world and makes them unique. For instance, people of Latin American culture celebrate Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. Mexican immigrants have carried this tradition with them to the United States, showing the way cultures can spread. Culture can also be defined as patterns of behavior and interaction that children learn as they are socialized. Different cultures should be preserved so they are not forgotten. An example of this is Native American culture, which has been oppressed since Europeans arrived in the Americas. Native American children were forced to attend Catholic boarding schools with the intention of removing their culture. This was a horrible practice. Today, people of different cultures should feel pride in themselves and their differences, because those differences are beautiful. Culture creates a group identity that makes one feel included. A current issue is cultural appropriation, where one cultural group takes over the practices of another. An example of this is non-Native Americans wearing a traditional Native American headdress. Those headdresses hold important symbolism and should be used respectfully. Culture to me is a person's way of communicating and a plethora of other traits that define how they live. The race that I fill out for the US Census is white, even though that grouping lacks any basis in science. My family is mainly from England, and I also have some German ancestors on my mother's side. My ancestor Joseph Parker immigrated with his family from England to America on a boat after meeting the Mormon missionaries and converting to Mormonism. The ethnicity I fit into is American because I have lived in America my whole life and share a language with the people here. I was born in Newport Beach and grew up in Irvine, the city where I still live. I speak English and a little bit of Spanish that I learned in high school. I often hear people speaking Spanish and distant English around my home, showing how Hispanic immigrants have influenced American culture. The clothes I wear, usually jeans and a sweater, are the same clothes that most other Americans wear. I eat typical American food like pasta and hamburgers. My culture has been part of the Mormon Church, or as we prefer to be called, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As part of my culture, I attend church every Sunday. Being Mormon also involves eating certain foods. Some traditional Mormon recipes are Jell-O salad and pinwheel potatoes. We celebrate Christmas and Easter with family and pray before meals to bless the food. It's also part of our religion to say prayers every night and to be baptized at the age of 8. Along with the practices of my religion, I also follow American culture. I dress up in a costume on Halloween, and my family hosted a dinner for our relatives on Thanksgiving. I am proud to be an American, even if there are many flaws currently facing our country. My previous responses function and fit into my everyday life because I see the bias people hold against people who have been sorted into different races, as well as the vibrant ethnicities and cultures of the people around me. I hear on the news that African Americans are discriminated against by the police because they are arrested at a higher rate than whites. This saddens me, and I think more education should be required to become a policeman. The most common ethnicity in Irvine where I live is Asian. I attended Northwood High School, where most of the other students were Asian, and I learned about parts of Asian culture. For instance, one of my friends in high school is from India and would bring Indian food for lunch every day. I got to try some of her food and it was delicious. Irvine celebrates its different cultures during the yearly Irvine Glover Village Festival. I hope the world will grow up to be more accepting of different cultures.